drafted early, they probably don't ever get paid. And all of a sudden, boom, you can get an opportunity to make some money. So that was good news going in no matter what happens. And then you watch the game play out and you realize just how talented some of the receivers are at K-State. And
KU.
you remember that Jalen Daniels is coming back
Right.
next year. And you remember that Texas and Oklahoma are out. And you remember that K-State has lost a ton this year. And you begin to wonder a little bit, as at least I was as I'm watching that, thinking, all right, the offense looked okay without Kotelnicki. They were still dynamic. They were still getting guys wide open, doing all these things. We know they'll be able to run the ball next year. They'll have Jalen Daniels, who, again, love Jason Bean and the work he's done at KU. Jalen Daniels is way better. And you think this team's going to have a chance to win a Big 12 championship next year, a legitimate chance to win a Big 12 championship next year. And you also realize they brought in what they're calling their best recruiting class of all time. It's not just turning it around to getting a 9-win season and a bowl win for KU, Tommy. It's that the future is as bright as it is anywhere in the conference for KU. You've got a new stadium an upgraded stadium being built. I mean, that all of those things are racing through my head, despite the penalties, despite I didn't even really care who won the game. I mean, I wanted KU to win, don't get me wrong, but those thoughts were there regardless of the outcome of the game. Was just that I mean, it is hard to imagine 3 years ago this future being this bright this quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different things about this program moving forward that get me really excited. And the retention is the biggest thing. And in a world of the transfer portal and in a world of players that are great declaring for the NFL draft, really that hasn't been a huge focus for the Jayhawks as soon as their regular season ended. It looks like Austin Booker may declare for the draft. He didn't play in the game last night. Dominic Pooney looks like he may declare for the draft. The offensive lineman, he didn't play in the game last night. Really, other than that, it's basically retention, right? Like they return next season a ton of their players, specifically big time playmakers at the skill positions offensively. It looks like a majority, if not all of their wide receivers basically will be back next season is what it sounds like. Devin Neal, that announcement you mentioned last night before the game, looks like he will be back. Daniel Highshaw, Dylan McDuffie, those guys are not seniors. It looks like they'll be back. And then you mentioned Jalen Daniels, and that's kind of the cherry on top. So yeah, I think the retention is outstanding. Credit to Lance Leipold and his staff for keeping these players and getting them to buy into this vision. And on top of that, it would have been really easy for a handful of players to enter the portal as soon as Andy Kotelnicki left for Penn State. A lot of the offensive players could have said, you know what, our offensive coordinator is gone. We're going to go ahead and transfer out. That didn't happen. That didn't happen with the Jayhawks. So you've got a team that won 9 games for the first time in 15 years, their first bowl game victory in 15 years. You've got a head coach that, despite speculation that has swirled for the last couple of years about whether or not he may go accept a bigger job somewhere else, it looks like he's locked in and is sticking around in Lawrence, at least for the foreseeable future, if not longer than that. And so everything is trending up for the Jayhawks. And I'm kind of with you. I watched the game last night, and of course, it was hard to get into a rhythm and actually settle in and watch the game in a really entertaining way. But I did think a lot the same things that you did. That this is a team that is not going away anytime soon. Texas and OU are out of the conference. I think that with the new teams coming in next season, you're probably looking at Utah being a team that could compete for a Big 12 championship from the get-go. Arizona could be a team that could compete for a Big 12 championship next season. Oklahoma State's probably up there. There's a handful of teams, I guess maybe even K-State, and we'll see how Avery Johnson plays in this bowl game tomorrow night. But I definitely think that there's a legitimate possibility that we could see the University of Kansas maybe be the preseason pick to win the Big 12 conference next season. On top of that, I also had a thought that, with all the returning talent and production and all of that coming back next season, it wouldn't shock me one bit to see Kansas be ranked in the preseason top 25 as well. So there's a lot trending upwards for the Jayhawks, and it really was on full display last night.
Yeah, I agree that, and that's just what kept running through my head was what does this team look like next year? And I don't know what the Pac-12 teams look like when they come back and join the league. That Prime is going to probably make some more splashes in the transfer portal. They didn't really recruit anybody out of high school. Utah will probably be good. Arizona will probably be good. So we'll see. But if and the elephant in the room, of course, is if Jalen Daniels is healthy, and I don't even know how to evaluate that at this point after this year. But if that happens, I mean, offensively, my goodness, like they are loaded, and as loaded as any team, certainly any team in the conference. But you look around the country when you're returning Devin Neal, and you watch all you didn't have to try hard to see how good those receivers are last night. Like you just watched them. They had a couple of busted coverages, but for the most part, those were contested catches. Guys going to get ball. Those look like NFL catches out there. So it's awesome to see it. And sort of the attention for me turns a little bit to Thursday and K-State. And what happens now with the Wildcats, who will lose far more than KU, certainly, but at the same time has far more depth in the program than KU does also, and is coming off of one of their best recruiting classes a year ago to try to replenish now what's being gone. And we'll see those players, a lot of them, on display for the first time Thursday, too, against a much better team, by the way, than UNLV. So I think we're going to get a good chance to sort of guess at it next year, which is kind of fun. They're also losing their offensive coordinator. They're bringing in Avery
Yeah.
Johnson. All of these highly touted players that they recruited in last year, how many of those freshmen can step up and have a big impact against a defense and against a team that's a top 25 team and pretty dang good? Like now, I'm last night got me fired up for Thursday because I think there's a chance both of these teams are picked near the top of the Big 12 next year.
Well, I think it's a really interesting exercise. If you were to take, I'm not even talking about the roster right now for either one of these teams. I'm talking about when the season begins next year. We're talking around Labor Day weekend in 2024. From top to bottom, with the two rosters right now, who do you put above the other? Do you put KU above K-State? Do you put K-State above KU? I mean, because we know the kind of talent that Avery Johnson has, but we also know that they've lost a bunch of players to the transfer portal. We know they don't have Colin Klein. We know that there was graduation, that one of the best, if not the best, linemen of all time at Kansas State, Cooper Beebe, is gone. Ben Sinnott is gone. A lot of the skilled players are not back next season. Trayshawn Ward transferring out of the program. So from top to bottom right now, do you take KU or K-State? I might sound like a KU homer. I think in this moment right now for next season, right this second, I'm probably going to take the Jayhawks.
I need to see Thursday to answer that question because I need to see how some of these young players look. This will be interesting if, as true freshmen, a lot of them can step into these roles and perform.
But from an experience standpoint and from returning production,
KU will be more experienced,
and all of that,
Yeah, KU will be more experienced. There's that won't be close. KU will definitely be more experienced. K-State's losing, a line and a quarterback that's been there for a long time, and their key cog at tight end who's going to go be an NFL guy, and all of those things.
And
there's
really,
no question
for KU
will be more experienced.
I'm trying to think, the only skill position player that they're losing, I think, is Mason Fairchild on offense, the tight end. I think that's basically it. I think there were a couple of, third string wide receivers that entered the transfer portal for the Jayhawks. But really, I mean, I guess you count Jason Bean, but Jalen Daniels is stepping right back in next season. So really the only true loss offensively is Mason Fairchild. On the defensive side, the only player that really we know of now is Kenny Logan, who's graduating and leaving the program. I want to talk about him later on in the show, by the way, but really he's the only one. I mean, it sounds like, I don't know if there's been an announcement made yet, but Kobe Bryant, I think is, debating on whether or not to come back. next season or not. Mello Dotson made an announcement that he's going to be coming back to Kansas. I know they're losing Austin Booker, they're losing, one of their offensive linemen, but by and large, the majority of that roster will be back next season.
Yeah, it is exciting to ponder. I was talking to Mike Schwenken that I had to work late last night because we've got crews out covering these bowl games. And I was like, man, I really think there's a chance you could see these two teams legitimately competing for a Big 12 title next year. I mean, and that far more needs to be answered for K-State. There's no question. Avery Johnson could be that kind of player, but he's not the only question that they have, right? Like Avery Johnson can be as good as the best of Jalen Daniels. And so Jalen Daniels is a big elephant in the room too for me for KU when we have this conversation, because they don't have Jason Bean as the backup plan anymore. So what is the backup plan?
It's probably Cole Ballard, and he looked pretty good in the relief that he did.
Right.
And that's the thing too. I mean, you have to keep in mind, this team won 9 games and won a bowl game with 3 different quarterbacks this season. They started 3 different quarterbacks and they were able to get to 9 wins, which is it's absolutely remarkable. I would take your Big 12 title conversation for both of these teams, because I don't disagree with you about Kansas State. I think that there are some more questions to be answered with the Wildcats, but I would take your Big 12 title conversation with both of these teams and I would raise it to, man, I think there's a legitimate chance that one or both of these teams we could potentially see in the CFP next season. I mean, keep in mind, it's expanded to 12 teams, and we're talking about a Big 12 without Texas and OU. I think
the Big 12 champion's going to get in
right.
CFP.
I'm just talking about like the stars kind of aligning for one or maybe both of these teams that we could potentially see in the CFP next season.
It is not crazy to say both teams could end up in the CFP. So let me just and that's what here's the reason why the CFP is amazing and incredible. Well, the expansion will be amazing and incredible, and just it will make the sport so much better, because yes, you can imagine a path for both of these teams. You could never imagine a path for these teams when it was 2 or 4 teams.
Right.
Wasn't ever going to happen, right? So now it's like, okay, they could get into this. And I don't care if they get in and they go play Georgia and Georgia beats them by 60. It still makes the season better to have that possibility exist. And the Big 12 champion will get in. So if one of them wins the Big 12, they'll be in. Yeah. I mean, they'll get in. And then the other, it's like, could you still finish as a top 12? Maybe. I think as we have this discussion aloud, it really is like, it's harder to see it right now for K-State because they have lost so much and they did lose Colin Klein. But I'm not going to count it out. Like, it's hard. One of the craziest things about college football, one of the things I actually love about it, is you do things like this and lose players well, you don't really know if that's how big a deal that is, because you generally in those you've never seen the backups. It's not like the pros where you know who the start. Most of the time it's an age thing, right? Like you haven't had your opportunity to play yet in college football. And K-State has a lot of really good young players that are going to get that opportunity now. Let's see what they got, right? Let's see what they can do. And they know that too, by the way. Like, they feel that. They want this. They have an opportunity to go do something and be something special. And they've been waiting for their moment. I mean, Avery Johnson's the poster child for it, but that's been all over the field. You don't think Will Ancio wants to play after sitting behind Ben Sinnott? You don't think Wesley Fair wants to play? And these are just the local guys, right? They had a great class, an historically good class for that program last year. So let's see what those guys have now as they've sat back. Then they may be overmatched in this one against NC State. But I don't know. And they're favored, but
and you mentioned some of the skill position players. DJ Giddens was a revelation this season. There were so many questions about what was going to happen when that program
and
lost
why,
Deuce
right?
Vaughn.
Just because he got an opportunity.
Exactly. And, they bring in the Florida State transfer and Trayshawn Ward. And I think the thought was, all right, well, he's at least there. So if it doesn't work with Giddens, at least we have Trayshawn Ward. And then Giddens, he's not Deuce Vaughn, but he was very capable running the football this season for the Wildcats to an extent to where Trayshawn Ward then left the program and transferred out. So, I mean, they still have those weapons. I'm not incredibly concerned about them as far as that's concerned. I think Avery Johnson is going to be great. not only in the bowl game on Thursday, but moving forward next season and beyond for the Wildcats. But yeah, I mean, there are some question marks with this program. There are question marks with every program, right? But, just with the amount of turnover that we've seen thus far with Kansas State, and knowing that they're going to be shorthanded in the bowl game, it makes me wonder exactly what the composition of this team will look like next year.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard not to imagine the future when you see that game last night. Let's talk more about that game last night. Let's take a break. Jayhawk fans, you can get in touch with the program on the IHOP hotline. 869-1240 is that number. It's Jacob Albracht. It's Tommy Castor. Max Power in, taking your calls. We'll get you on the air if you want to chime in. We'll dig in to that game a little bit last night. 49-36 winners, a barn burner, an interesting game, a tough game to watch for reasons out of both of the teams' control to some degree. We'll get into all of it as we continue on a Sports Daily on a Wednesday.
Your phone call is welcome. 869-1240. Sports Daily on 97.5 and 1240. KFH, Wichita's number. Commercials are over.
Yo, I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back in. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily. Morning after a late night KU win in a bowl game to get to 9 wins on the season. I know KU fans are riding high, thinking about the future. Let's talk about last night, Tommy. And I don't want to give a ton of attention to these officials. It's really annoying that became a part of the game in the way that it did, but it did. So whatever, we can get into that. It mattered less because they won, thankfully. 49 points. I thought last night was such a perfect microcosm of Jason Bean and who he is. Just absolutely jaw-dropping, what are you thinking plays, and then a couple of big plays too. That guy he just goes, and he's, I guess fearless is the right word, but just some of the throws were so wild and crazy. And even let's be real, some of the big plays, he made good throws on some of the plays the receivers went and got the balls. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But he also made some bad throws on plays where receivers went and got the balls. And then, of course, the interceptions. But that was just a wild experience, the Jason Bean ride last night.
It's all gas, no brakes for Jason Bean. That's the way that it always has been. I remember coming on this program a year ago after they played Arkansas in the bowl game. And I don't know if you remember the way that triple overtime game ended for Kansas, because Jalen Daniels played in that game, remember, and had a pretty good game and led the comeback. But the final play for Kansas, when they ultimately lost the game against Arkansas, Jason Bean threw the pass, and he threw it 10 rows deep into the stands to end the game for the Jayhawks. And I remember coming on this program and just eviscerating the Jayhawks and that decision to put the ball in the hands of Jason Bean when you're in triple overtime. And, that was the play call that they came up with when you had Jalen Daniels, who had been cooking the entire game. I was really, really upset about it at the time. And, looking back on it, still, it's frustrating that that's the way that it went down. But it was just the fact that was the way that the bowl game ended for the Jayhawks a year ago, and for Jason Bean specifically a year ago. He could have left. He could have been done with football. He could have walked away. He could have transferred somewhere else. He could have done a bunch of different things. He decided to come back to Kansas, and he had no idea when he decided to come back that he would end up leading the team, that Jalen Daniels would again go down with an injury and he would take over. He had no idea that he would be starting a bowl game in Phoenix this season. He didn't know that, but he decided to come back. You got to take the good with the bad with Jason Bean. He's got to be a guy that, I heard somebody refer to him as the David McCormick of KU football, because he just made these inexplicable decisions, but then he would do incredible things also. And you just are perplexed with how it all goes down with a guy like Jason Bean. But the one thing about him is that he committed, he was loyal, he stepped in when he was needed. And, by the way, he's now second in the number of touchdowns thrown all time in his career at Kansas. It's him and Todd Reesing, who's right above him. He surpassed Carter Stanley last night in the bowl game. And this is a guy that, competed for a starting role when he first came to Kansas, but then was relegated to the backup position, stepped in on numerous occasions, and now he's the second all-time leading touchdown thrower in the history of the Jayhawks. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, he's been a great Jayhawk, I think, as much as anything else when I think about him. McCormick of football is probably about perfect because, you can't win without him, but he drives fans nuts, right? That's a good description of it. I didn't see that game last night going that way. I thought they'd run the ball a ton, and it just wasn't. It really wasn't opening up, and a credit to some degree to UNLV.
That was about the only thing UNLV could do defensively was stop the run. Devin Neal didn't have a huge game.
I don't want to say that's the only thing they couldn't do. They kept giving up big plays, and so did KU, quite frankly, defensively. Bean was at 23 yards of completion or something absurd like that, but it was busted coverages, and it was receivers making massive plays. Look, I think the theme of the game went the way it did for me last night is despite some poor decisions and some poor throws, those receivers made incredible plays,
Yeah.
incredible plays. And I'm like, okay. And I've got nothing but appreciation for Jason being in the job he's done. But I just like imagine those receivers with a full healthy season of Jalen Daniels. And I'm like, man, they could really have something special. That group of pass catchers, you know, I don't, Grimm never gets targeted a ton. I can't figure out why, but Skinner and Arnold are big time receivers. Grimm is a big play receiver, I suppose. I really do think he could be more than that. But that they got 3 of them that you'll go to war with against any 3, any combination, probably just on ability.
They've got a
in
4th in Wilson, and Trevor Wilson, by the way, also, who had a couple of catches. He didn't have a huge game, but he's somebody that, can grab a couple of passes throughout the game too. I mean, they are incredibly deep at the wide receiver position. It's been, I was going to say a long time. I don't remember if there's ever been a time where the Jayhawks have had that deep of a wide receiver room.
Well, I'm trying to remember a time where, and again, this is potential, and they were playing UNLV, but the things that you saw, it didn't matter who they were playing. They were going to make those plays, and the fact that they can make those plays, like I'm telling you, that group of just skill players based on ability has a chance to be one of the best rooms in the country next year. And they've had a little run here. Remember, was it Chase or Jefferson who spent just a second with the Jayhawks?
Chase did. Yeah, he committed.
They've kind of had some guys.
Yeah, when Les Miles was the coach,
right.
There was like a string of Louisiana guys that briefly committed to the Jayhawks and then went away. Chase never played a game, obviously, for Kansas, but that wide receiver room, yeah, it's impressive, and they've been doing it all season. And honestly, it hasn't mattered if it was Jalen Daniels or Jason Bean or Cole Ballard. Lawrence Arnold is a big time playmaker. And some of the catches where he's elevating and going up and getting the ball, just incredible catches in that regard. And the one thing too, when it comes to these wide receivers and just offensively, is that keep in mind, they put up the number of yards they did. They put up the number of points they did last night without Andy Kotelnicki. And Andy Kotelnicki had been the offensive coordinator the entire time. And, so now I think that when you look ahead to the future, and also don't forget, it's really easy to get into a what if type scenario with this program. But man, a coin flip game against Oklahoma State in Stillwater earlier this year, a walk-off field goal by Texas Tech, an incredibly tight game against the Wildcats in the Sunflower Showdown. Of course, a Texas game where Jalen Daniels gets held out 5 minutes before kickoff, but the Jayhawks hang with them for 3 quarters. I mean, any one of those games or multiple of those games could have potentially gone the other direction. We could be talking about a Jayhawks team that they could have been in the hunt for a Big 12 title. They could have been in the hunt for maybe a New Year's Six bowl. Like there were a lot of different things that if it had just gone a little bit different, we could be having a different conversation right now.
There's no question. And I think that's a part of why it's such an exciting time. I think that the NIL situation at KU is clearly in a good place. I think you could see, the good thing about the game last night for KU is they were kind of there by themselves, right? There was nothing they were competing with. There was no NFL. There was no nothing. Players are watching that game and seeing that. And I do think that, that stuff matters, right? And maybe there's a transfer out there that they could get that's an impactful guy and all of those things on the table. Lance Leipold, you mentioned Kotelnicki. Tommy, it's in the same way for K-State. That was the biggest question of this game, right? Like for the future and everything else. Devin Neal's announcement, everything I suppose was bigger, but you got to know that they can operate without Kotelnicki. What is a little bit interesting is, on the interim, you have somebody there that's a part of things. When next year rolls around and it's Grimes, you won't have that, right? So, is he going to do his own thing? How does that happen? Because
I think you have to keep the continuity.
Works.
You have to keep the continuity. And I know that's a reason why Jeff Grimes was hired, because, I read an interview with Lance Leipold where he talked about hiring Jeff Grimes and the philosophy that Grimes brings to the table is very similar to the philosophy that Andy Kotelnicki has. Now, it doesn't mean that they're carbon copies of one another, but so there's probably going to be some different wrinkles and things like that. But the one thing that Andy Kotelnicki always brought to the table in his play design and his play calling, a lot of motion, a lot of, receivers going in different directions, misdirection, things like that. That's something that Jeff Grimes, I think, brings to the table as well, that we've seen over the course of his career as an offensive coordinator. And so you have to take what the personnel gives you, and you have to play to those strengths of the players that are on that team, with the wide receivers that they have, with the running backs that they have. It's a really explosive and dynamic offense. You have to do everything that you can to make sure that you're giving them opportunities. And that's one thing Jason Bean did last night. He gave those wide receivers opportunities to go and make plays, and they did.
Yeah, they certainly did. And it was very impressive to see, and I loved to see it. Lance Leipold certainly continues to just have his teams prepared in a way that gives you hope.
Can we talk about him for a second, though? The remarkable turnaround. And I know that's the thing on everybody's mind that they've been talking about. This team went 0-9 in the COVID year with Les Miles, the last year he was there. Got a short start when he got hired, missed like the spring game. He wasn't even on staff. Leipold wasn't when KU played their spring game. They went 2-10. Then they go 6-7. They make it to a bowl game. They lose the bowl game. 9-4 in his third year, 3 different quarterbacks throughout the season, and a bowl victory. I just don't know what more you can say about the job that he's done.
Not much. I mean, KU fans, you got it right. Finally, you've deserved this, obviously, after all the getting it wrong over the years. And I think it's almost a lesson to the rest of the country when you're looking for next head coaches, right? So often it's, okay, who is, you got, whether it's retreads in the SEC or who's XYZ, sometimes the best hire is just coaches that know how to win games. And sometimes you got to go and find coaches that have won for a long time and bring them in, and there you go. That stuff translates.
They know how to win. They build a culture. Chris Kleiman was the same way coming in from North Dakota State.
Absolutely. I think too often in college football, we think, oh, it's only about the players that come in. And that is not the case. Not even close. There have been people recruiting up against Alabama and beating them in recruiting lots of years, right? Why is it that they continue to be that team? Well, culture, winning, right? Like they just like whatever it is, game planning, strategy. It's so funny, Tommy. Like in the NFL, right? We know the talent margin is super thin, and we give so much credit to coaches for being able to overcome those razor thin lines, right? In college football, it's almost like there's this perception of, well, you just have to have all the best players, which is certainly a big part of things, but it's not everything. And we see it. Look at A&M. A&M's a perfect example. And they finally took that path to some degree, and not that Jimbo Fisher wasn't a winning coach. Of course he was. He won a ton at Florida State before they hired him. But sometimes flash isn't what you need. You need somebody to come in and redefine what it is that you're going to do. The recruiting piece, especially with NIL now to a large degree, a lot of that stuff will kind of take care of itself, right? You have entire staffs of people to be in charge of that. And now you have pots of money to help you do it. I don't know how much coaches are able to coach anymore. I know at Kansas, Lance Leipold certainly does a ton of it. But
it's absolutely imperative, I think, still, even in today's college football world.
I think it's more.
And here's the thing. I have regrettably watched a lot of Jayhawk football over the last 15 years. I've watched probably more than I should have over that stretch of time. And one of the things that it didn't matter if it was Turner Gill or Charlie Weiss or David Beatty or Les Miles, one common thread throughout all of those horrible teams throughout the last 15 years is that they didn't know how to win. And there were several games, I don't exactly know how many, there were at least probably 10 games over that stretch where they were in a position to win a game, and then they just let it go. They couldn't close the deal. They couldn't figure out how to win. In some cases, I think that they were outmatched and they got tired and let it go. In other cases, I think that there just wasn't a winning culture and they didn't know how to win, and they never had been in that position before. They didn't know how to handle it. They freaked out and they ended up losing the game. That happened so many different times over the course of the last 15 years with this program. So I think that having a coach, and I don't care if you won at Wisconsin, Whitewater, and Buffalo, but you knew how to win. You knew how to win games and win championships and build that culture and bring that mentality to a new program. It doesn't matter where you won at, as long as you won and you know how to communicate that and bring that into your new team. That's exactly what Lance Leipold has done. That's what Chris Kleiman did when he came into Kansas State.
From North Dakota State. Listen, I have always been an advocate, and I almost now wear this as a badge of honor for these two programs because I think it validates what I've said for a long time, is that coaches can make that jump. They can.
Yeah.
They flat can. Brian Kelly was one of the first to do it. And I growing up as a Notre Dame fan, and so I go to a Division II college, West Texas A&M, and I said forever, like some of these programs where they just win all the time, these coaches could win at every level. And people used to laugh at that and be like, okay, well, why is it that my university is sending guys to the NFL, is, sending coaches to the NFL? Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator for the Vikings, he was a quarterbacks coach at West Texas when I was there, right? Like they had coaches all over the place that elevate. So, and the head coaches that lead these programs, I'm just like, these guys could lead any program in college football. And so when Notre Dame back in the day was looking for a coach, I'm like, they should hire Brian Kelly. And it seemed crazy at the time. I think he was at Grand Valley State then, and he had to go there by way of like Central Michigan or something. Like he had to make this Central Michigan.
Cincinnati? Wasn't he the coach there too? I don't remember.
Yeah, he had to make two. You might be right. He might have to make two stops, right? But my thought always at the time was like, he should have been there. And Grand Valley they were never going to hire, Grand Valley State's head coach. But he was, let me go back and look at just how good he was there. They won. They never lost more than 2 games in any of his seasons there. I don't think they had a little stretch in there right before the end when he won a couple of national championships.
2 national
played
championships.
in the national championships 3 years in a row. So then he had to go to Central Michigan. Then he had to go to Cincinnati. Then he finally goes to Notre Dame, and it was the right hire. I'm like, okay, well, you watch all that all the time, and you sort of defend it, especially when you're in the middle of it. And I was very close to the programs and all the things that would happen at that level. And I'm like, why doesn't this happen more often? So the fact now that those kinds of coaches have both landed at Kansas and Kansas State with Chris Kleiman more directly, right? He didn't have any other stops. And at the time it was like, oh, Gene Taylor makes this bold move. He's crazy. And I'm like, he's not crazy, guys. Like he knows who this guy is. This guy's a winner, and he knows it's a culture fit. And finally, KU does the same thing with Leipold. And they don't go after the splash of Les Miles. And Les Miles was recruiting really well, right? He was bringing guys in. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what? Let's just go get a coach that knows how to win and build the thing the right way, because that's how it's going to have to be done here. And here it is. So I love that both of these guys are having that success. I advocate for the lower level coaches all the time because I think that gap is closer than people realize. And good for them. I'm happy for KU. I'm happy for Lance Leipold. The most optimistic people in the world couldn't see this coming, I don't think. And the talent is rotating in enough now, Tommy. And we saw this a little bit with Leipold in the beginning, where it's not just Leipold's clearly a great coach and he's taking these players that were already here, and now he's also bringing in more players.
Yeah,
and that's it's almost like the final piece of like, all right, this is going to work, and this is going to work really well.
And the final point that I want to make, one player that I want to highlight is Kenny Logan. He played in his final bowl game yesterday, or final game in the bowl game yesterday. He was a Les Miles guy. And when all of that controversy happened and Miles was out and they brought in Lance Leipold, it could have been really easy for Kenny Logan to go somewhere else. And instead, he was the first Jayhawk, if memory serves, to really plant his flag.
I think that's right. Yeah.
As a Jayhawk under Lance Leipold and stick around and be a part of what they're building. And the fact that the game last night was the culmination of that for a guy like Kenny Logan, who has been kind of the quarterback of the defense for a number of years, and being a Les Miles guy initially. I couldn't be happier for that kid.
There's a lot of those, and there's a lot coming back, and we can talk more about it, KU fans, because I know it was an exciting game. And again, the thing that makes me the most excited were some of the texts from KU fans I see last night, which is essentially like, hey, there's a real chance we could like win the Big 12 and go to the CFP next year. And the reality is, there's absolutely that chance. There's absolutely that chance. And the best thing about it is the other team we pay attention to is in the same boat to some degree next year. You don't think the expanded playoff is going to be better? Just wait until next year. That's all I can say is just wait until next year, and you'll see how much better it's going to be. Don't even talk to me about when the playoff actually starts. I don't even care. It will make the regular season exponentially more fun. All right, let's take a quick break, 869-1240. We'll come back. Some other topics in the sports world. We'll look ahead to that K-State game on Thursday a little bit as we're beginning to hear from the Wildcats a little bit and try to get a grasp of what's coming against North Carolina State, a team of which I watched zero football this year, only know that they won some big games and are probably pretty good. We'll get into all of that as we make our way through a midweek edition. Hump Day. Happy Hump Day, everybody, on Sports Daily.
97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Tune in to the Retire Hour Show Saturday at 7 a.m. on KFH or online at kfhradio.com.
This holiday season, all your wishes are coming true on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Lutz, L-U-T-Z, and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and KFA. 21 plus and present in Kansas. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame money line wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is not withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. Gambling problem? Getting help is your best bet. Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com.
Urgent Camp Lejeune settlement message. On September 6th, the government announced it will soon begin providing fast, guaranteed settlements to Camp Lejeune Marines, families, and civilians. Awards will range between $100,000 and $550,000, with an option for higher amounts. If you or a loved one spent time at Camp Lejeune and suffered cancers of the bladder, liver, or kidneys, leukemia, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Parkinson's, or kidney issues, you may qualify for compensation and could be paid within 60 days after accepting your settlement, with your VA benefits fully protected. You may be entitled to a significant financial award for your Camp Lejeune claim, but you must act now. Call the James Harris Law Camp Lejeune helpline now to get the compensation you deserve. We're already fighting for thousands harmed by the water at Camp Lejeune. Call now or you may forever lose your right to be awarded a settlement between $100,000 and $550,000. For your free evaluation, call 800-217-1155. That's 800-217-1155. 800-217-1155.
$6.95. Get the Spangles $6.95 Classic American Meal Deal. You get a big 20-ounce Pepsi, a classic Black Angus steak burger, crispy fries, and an 8-ounce mudslide for only $6.95. $6.95! It's an entire meal at a great price. Made fresh when you order and not before. The Spangles $6.95 Classic American Meal Deal. Get one today.
Freshness made to order. Spangles, it just tastes better.
Would you like to earn up to $60,000 a year as a general manager and have advancement opportunities earning up to $100,000 as an area supervisor? Then Kansas-owned and operated Spangles is the place for you. Spangles restaurant teams make our value, quality, and freshness happen every day. So if you have previous experience and want to earn great pay, bonuses, benefits, and the opportunity for advancement, stop by any Spangles or go online at spanglesinc.com. That's spanglesinc.com.
Come join our team.
Diabetes
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-700-6898. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-700-6898. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-700-6898. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too. Call 800-700-6898, 800-700-6898, or biglou.com.
Oh, okay, take it easy. We're going in the air.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Sports Daily on KFH. Tommy Castor, Jacob Albracht, Max Power producing the show today. In for Jad Chambers, the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. Wrapping up hour number one here, a very short segment before we get into hour number two. A lot more to get to. We'll look ahead to the Kansas State Bowl game tomorrow night in Orlando, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and a lot more kind of maybe a early look ahead to the NFL slate this weekend. A lot to get to in hour number two, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm excited about this week of football. It's fantasy football championship week. What I'm not excited about, Tommy, is something we've both been dealing a little bit this week. And I'm worn out because my entire family's been sick the entire Christmas break. And I know everybody everywhere is sick. Like literally everybody everywhere is sick. It's just like dropping like flies. And I'm like, when's my time coming? It's like this dread, like, when's my time coming? When is it happening? Because it's coming.
I'm kind of with you. I haven't had, like, my family has all had it. I have not yet over the last month or so. I don't even know. I don't know either. I've avoided it.
What
sickness.
is it?
I don't know.
I already had COVID. I know it's not that. Like that already ran through us. Like what is this out there? Give us a break here. It's Christmas break.
I don't even know what day it is. It's that kind of week.
Honestly, I've had that happen to me about 14 times already. We don't have any guests coming up right now, do we? What day is it?
We got nothing going on today.
Let's talk some football then when we come back on Sports Daily.
Sports, later news, and great comedy with Bob and Tom mornings, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. Wichita, always live on the free Odyssey app.
Wonka is here, and to celebrate, IHOP's teaming up with the brilliant inventor himself to create a brand new magical Wonka menu. Try magnificently mouthwatering
happen every day.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Hour number 2 here of Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here. Max Power in for Chad this week. Happy to have you. Wildcat fans, you can check out GoPowerCat.com's PowerCat podcast, latest bowl and transfer portal news, as well as men's and women's basketball all season long. Follow PowerCat podcasts on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk a little bit about K-State's bowl game coming up later in this hour. We will certainly get into it tomorrow as well. Tim Fitzgerald should be in, and we will get maybe a preview of NC State. I know he's probably looked at them more than we have. I have not studied them. I'm not going to, Tommy. I'm going to be fully honest about that. Definitely not going to sit out and go back and comb through the NC State footage. I don't do that with bowl games. I don't care, but I do care about what what K-State does. So we'll talk about that as we make our way through. It's an interesting NFL week this week, Tommy, as I think there are games that we can get pretty excited about pretty much all week. Starts tomorrow night. Browns-Jets, I think, has certainly some appeal. Then Saturday, you get Lions-Cowboys, which absolutely has appeal. And then as we make our way through it, there are games, I think, that have interest. Falcons-Bears has interest because what do the Bears do at quarterback is still a massive question, I think, looming in the NFL. Dolphins-Ravens will be the headline game of the week. It's a noon game on Sunday, which is interesting. They keep Packers-Vikings as Sunday Night Football. And then, of course, Bengals-Chiefs, which we're paying attention to here. It's a good slate. I think there's enough here late in the season that is okay, there's a lot of implications here still as with 2 weeks left to go. That's always what you worry about, right? Is that things are decided, and they're just absolutely, I don't think anything's decided yet in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the Ravens and the Dolphins game. I mean, I think that's going to tell us a whole lot about the way that the playoffs are going to shape out. And so I'm looking forward to that game because I do think, and I've been higher on the Dolphins all season long than you have. I think that they are for real. I think they are the most likely threat to the Ravens and might prevent the Ravens from getting to a Super Bowl. I really believe that out of all of the other teams in the AFC. And so we're going to find out for sure this weekend exactly where the Dolphins are standing with a couple of weeks left in the season. The big knock on them for a long time had been they hadn't beaten anybody. They beat the Cowboys last week. We've been looking at their final 3 games. the entire season, and that's going to tell us a lot about the Dolphins. So I'm looking forward to this game.
Couple of interesting lines out there. The Cowboys are 6-point favorites against the Lions. That game you just mentioned, the Ravens are 3.5-point favorites against the Dolphins. The Chiefs are a touchdown favorite over the Bengals. So, I think I would probably lean Ravens in that. The Dolphins are a really interesting team. For so long, they have not been a good road team, especially when you think about going and, from the climate of Miami to Baltimore, quite frankly. So I'm interested in that test as well. I think that they're built and designed a way that they can get it done. And I am very, very excited to see them play their next two games. If it's not one of the teams we follow, I could totally get on, like, as far as a rooting interest, I'm just talking about here, a Dolphins train, right? Because that fan base deserves that, right? That fan base deserves a Super Bowl. 1972, I think enough time has passed where we can say we're not quite as sick of that anymore. I mean, the Dolphins deserve one. That's a team I could get behind. And they're obviously exciting, and Tua's story is cool, and Tyreek's electric, and we'll see. Jalen Waddle, I think, by the way, is in question for that game, which is not good for them. But we'll see. I look at this Bears game, Tommy. I am so fascinated by Justin Fields. I don't know what the Bears should do here. I don't know. They're going to have the top pick by way of the Panthers. So they can essentially have their pick at quarterback, or I would assume take Marvin Harrison Jr. And then they have another early pick. And then they could, in theory, still trade Justin Fields. I don't know what I think I don't have a strong take on it. I just don't know. Honestly, I think I would move on from Fields. Not as much that it's a knock on Fields as it is, if he is good, he's going to get real expensive very soon. And are you, like, is there a cost saving? But the problem is, like, you have to believe in one of the young quarterbacks, or is there a different quarterback we're not thinking about that maybe they could go after in the short term and just load that quarterback up with a young? I've seen rumors out there of, like, going to try a trade for Justin Herbert. Obviously, you would do that if you were the Bears. I mean, if you were the Bears, you'd give up pick 1 for Justin Herbert. You'd give up 1-1 for Herbert. But I just, that the Chargers aren't going to do that, by the way. Their path here is fascinating to me because it centers around a quarterback who tantalizes us, but still looks a little behind in a lot of ways too. I don't know what they should do, but I watch these games with them and think of them all as like a Justin Fields. This is it. He's not only playing for his job there, but he's sort of playing for a job across the league.
Well, I think that if you take out the scenario that you mentioned where they go and they trade for an established starting quarterback in the NFL, if you take that out, because I kind of think that's unlikely, that might not be the worst decision in the world, but I think it's unlikely that the Bears do that. If the two scenarios are either stay with Justin Fields or trade him away and draft another quarterback with the first overall pick, my opinion is you keep Justin Fields and you continue to build around him. That's my opinion, because I'm not super blown away by the options at quarterback coming into the draft and coming out of college. I'm really not. If it was a loaded draft class, it might be a little bit different. Caleb Williams, I know there's a ton of hype around him, and there are things that he does that are tantalizing and that get you really excited. But man, he didn't have a great year at USC. In a year that he was supposed to take college football by storm, he really didn't, right? And I think that a lot of his skills will translate well to the NFL, but I'm not so blown away that I feel like you ought to trade away Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams after the year that Williams had at UFC. Drake May is the other guy at quarterback. I think he's fine. He's a prototypical quarterback, that I think will be okay in the NFL, but I'm not blown away by amazing talent at the quarterback position that you can draft with the first overall pick. So if I'm the Bears, I'm keeping Justin Fields. I'm drafting, I don't know, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. or somebody like that to have another explosive playmaker alongside DJ Moore in Chicago. And then you have another early pick and you can go elsewhere and continue the reinforcements and building this team up. I'm just not right now feeling like they need to completely blow it up and trade away Justin Fields?
I don't think they need to blow it up anyway. I think an experienced quarterback is the interesting piece. I don't know if people have
I
noticed
would
their
do that.
defense
I
is-
would be okay with that if they decided they wanted to go out and get a legitimate established quarterback. Again, I don't think it's going to be Justin Herbert, like you mentioned. That's kind of unlikely. The Chargers aren't going to do that.
I think Bears fans are just dreaming.
I think that there
point.
might be, and I don't know exactly who off the top of my head, but there could be another couple of quarterbacks out there that would be intriguing. And Kirk Cousins, maybe would he go to the Bears from the Vikings coming off of an Achilles injury? I mean, I don't know if he's going to be back in Minnesota. That could be somebody for a year or two that's a veteran and established and could really use those weapons around him.
Look, I think that's an option. I don't know what the option is. But what I do know is their defense is playing better than people realize. They've given up 20 points only one time in their last 6 games, and right at 20-7. Like they've been better, much better defensively. And so you see these pieces, and you could take Marvin Harrison Jr. at 1-1 and then take an offensive lineman with whatever the other pick they end up with is, and you move forward with Fields. I could see it. Fields needs perfection. I as somebody who's debating whether to play Justin Fields, Nick Mullins, or Jake Browning in fantasy championships this week, you shouldn't be doing that with Justin Fields. He needs at this point in his career to sort of take this thing over. And it's hard too, because that game against, Cleveland, he had what should have been a Hail Mary converted at the end, which would have given him, probably 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. He shouldn't have had any interceptions. Both came on Hail Mary plays. And so I just don't know what the progress is. I do know that he needs to run more. And I do know he's never going to be a pocket passer, and they need to stop trying to do that. That's not what he is. That's not what he's going to be. You got to let that guy run. And a lot of that's him. I don't think he scrambles enough either. But that's enough about the Bears. Why do we talk that much about the Bears? Let's talk about the Chiefs. So we've, I think, cleared now the chaos of Monday enough to start to look at these games a little bit. This will be an interesting test for the defense. I think it'll be a good test for the defense. 7-point favorites. I assume Jamar Chase will be back at this point. The Bengals are not a pushover. We know that. The Bengals are still alive in the playoff hunt. The Bengals are going to bring it ahead of, a Jamar Chase-less Bengals team and Jake Browning struggling for the first time. They had quality wins over Jacksonville, Indianapolis, and Minnesota. So now Kansas City looks here, and, the game is very different than we thought it would be at this point when we saw the schedule come out. But it's got certainly a similar level importance, I think, here. Cincinnati clinging to life, Kansas City trying to finish off a division and give us some semblance that they can get it done still in the playoffs. This does become, in what's a very strange way, almost just as interesting as we always thought it would be, just in a very, very different way than we thought it would be.
Yeah, I don't exactly know the best way to come at this game on New Year's Eve with the Bengals. And really, I think a lot of it is, of course, what we've talked about with Kansas City ad nauseum over and over and over again. But then you add in another wrinkle, and the fact that the Bengals, who are clinging to life and looked really good for the first couple of weeks when Jake Browning took over, did not look good against the Steelers over the weekend at all. And the Steelers, with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, kind of ran all over the Bengals. And so I don't exactly know where this Bengals team stands right now with Jake Browning at quarterback. So there's a lot of unknowns going into this game this weekend. I know that you mentioned that Kansas City is a touchdown favorite right now. I'm not touching that at all. When we picked that game on Friday, I'm not looking forward to picking that game because there's no way to predict it. There really isn't. I just don't know. I think that because of where the Bengals are and their desperation, I think that they play better against Kansas City than they did against the Steelers a week ago. They've not played well against the Steelers at all this season. It was a divisional matchup, obviously, both times, and those divisional matchups are really difficult for Cincinnati, especially taking on Pittsburgh. They're 0-2 against the Steelers. So I think the Bengals will play better against Kansas City on New Year's Eve than they did a week ago. It's really honestly going to come down to, Can Kansas City finally get at least some of their mistakes figured out and get back on the same page and start to row in the same direction again and stop shooting themselves in the foot? I think that's easier said than done. I'm not holding my breath that it's going to happen, but that's what it's going to have to take for Kansas City this weekend.
So the over-under is 44.5. I'll tell you what I want to see out of Kansas City. Their eyes light up that Jake Browning's thrown 5 interceptions in his last 3 games. I want to see them do what I've said. I want to see them redefine the way they go at this game. I want to see them embrace the ugly. Embrace the fact that you're not explosive offensively. Embrace the fact that you're going to have to just take things most likely in small chunks. You're going to have to run the ball and see if they can't just go in with that philosophy. And maybe a few plays break and who knows, but try to focus on putting Cincinnati in a position to fail. Yeah. Right? Field position matters. Put Jake Browning deep in his own territory. Make them press. Stop the run. Make him throw. Try to take advantage of that and then capitalize on those things. See if they can become a team that's designed more like the way the Ravens are playing right now, right? Opportunistically, letting things, sort of play themselves out and just waiting for the other team to make a mistake rather than feeling like you've got to force things so much that you're making a mistake. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with penalties. I don't know what to tell you about the penalties. I really don't. Like, they have got to figure out a way to stop the penalties, but they do need to redefine what it is that they're doing. And this is honestly a pretty good opportunity and a pretty good opponent to do that against. Earl is on the line. Earl, welcome in. We haven't heard from you since Monday, Earl. I was a little worried about you, but I assume things are okay. Merry belated Christmas. How are you?
Well, thank you so much. And merry belated Christmas to you guys and Happy New Year forthcoming. Look, there's been some changes since last year on the Chiefs, and human chemistry is a difficult thing to say, hey, this is going to work, this isn't going to work. But I can say this now. We are now Breaking Bad because Bieniemy, he was Walter White, and Nagy is screwing up the cook. Look, a real good offensive coordinator takes into account his players' strengths and weaknesses and devises a plan to put them in the best position to succeed. The tackles have some difficulties in some areas in that. It doesn't seem like they're game planning to kind of help that. Moreover, during that game on Christmas, which what a ruining Christmas Day game that was, you never run a gimmick play inside your 10 while you're ahead in a football game, man. So when I watch these guys, and it has gotten worse, and it's painful to watch, it seems like they're complacent. It feels like their hunger has been well fed. And, guys like Travis Kelce, he doesn't seem to have his legs under him. Could be a Taylor Swift thing, the old boxing saying, before bouts, you want to make sure that you're running clean. With that said, man, there's still hope, but my gosh, the only variable, and this is very difficult for a team to look this bad that won a Super Bowl last year, is you got to look for what's the variable. The variable is Nagy. Nagy came after being a complete failure as a head coach in Chicago. So I think there's some bear stink on him. And once again, I don't believe he's very detail-oriented. Now, I'll say this too. It's Andy's job. He's the head coach to keep this thing on track. But how many times have you seen Andy Reid in a State Farm commercial and other commercials? So after winning the Super Bowl, these guys aren't focused. They're not focused. They're not disciplined. They're not hungry.
I was good with all of it, but I'm glad you bring this up. I don't know if we've talked about this here. These guys shoot these commercials in the eye. They haven't thought about a State Farm commercial in 10 months, right? Those things are done in the summer and they're over with. And Travis Kelce's allowed to have a girlfriend. Like, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. NFL stars have been in commercials forever. That doesn't have anything to do. Patrick Mahomes being in State Farm commercials doesn't have anything to do with the struggles they've had this year. They haven't thought about that stuff in forever. That stuff is done and in the past. They're not like, instead of practicing on a Tuesday, going to catch a commercial shoot real quick.
Would you say we do not exist in a vacuum? right, Jacob? So even though they shot the commercial 10 months ago, do you think people come up there and talk to him about it? And by the way, Andy Reid has put on some LBs from last year. I mean, that Andy, there were times during his Chiefs coaching career that he weighed a lot less. So, you can, putting it on the offensive coordinator that changed, but ultimately the huge responsibility is on Andy Reid. And people catch up with what you are scheming. We are not doing any scheming to overcome what they have done to catch up with our scheming.
So, Earl, I will say, I think one thing that you are right on, and that I agree with you on out of everything that you said, is that the difference in personality between Eric Bieniemy and Matt Nagy as offensive coordinator. Eric Bieniemy is fiery. The one thing that we knew about him was that he was willing to even get into it with guys on the sideline. And I know, just because of his personality, that he probably wasn't always just going along to get along with the things that Andy Reid wanted to do. There was probably some push and pull, maybe some tug of war at times. That's kind of what you need occasionally from a coordinator with your head coach. It looks to me that Matt Nagy is more of a just kind of defer to Andy Reid, not really challenge anything. If this is what you want to do, then I guess we'll do it. And I think you can definitely tell the change in their personalities from the offensive coordinator from last season to this year.
Okay, when you say you can agree with one of the things. Okay, let me ask you guys then, in a nutshell, what you saw on Christmas Day, how in the heck do you explain that? How do you really explain that offensive football team looking as dismal as it did on Christmas Day? If it's not anything that I've thrown out there, what the heck is the reason?
No, I think it is. I
think it's a lot of that.
I think it is what. Yeah, it's what you've thrown out there. Or the only thing I don't agree with you on is the distracted because they're shooting. And I've heard a lot of that. Like, they're distracted because they're shooting commercials. Travis Kelce's distracted because NFL TV crews take shots of the booth where his girlfriend is, even though he has no idea that's happening. He's on the field. Like, those are the things. I think Travis Kelce has had a couple of mistakes that we wouldn't normally see for a couple of reasons. One, he and Mahomes are very clearly pressing to try to make up for everything else. And that has weighed heavy on them. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The two of them together are not what they have been in the past. Now, for Kelce, he's also, reached an age in his career where guys at that position
had
typically
some injuries
do
this
begin
year
to
too.
lose. Yeah, and he's been playing through injuries and all of those things for sure. But I think it has more to do with them pressing. So those two I can look at. I do think you're right. This team needs Eric Bieniemy in a bad way. They need somebody when you continuously, if a wide receiver lines up offsides or a tackle lines up offsides one more time, how do you think that conversation with Eric Bieniemy on the sideline goes?
Oh, he'd have their hind end.
Inexcusable. Like, you can make the excuse that they never call that. They're calling it, and they've been calling it all year. So stop doing it.
They called it a lot more after that happened. You can at least agree on that. I mean,
Jawan Taylor had been that was the storyline of the first 3 weeks, is that he kept lining up offside,
but
and in a bad position.
You're watching other tackles do the same darn thing right now without a flag.
But you know what?
I mean,
here's the thing.
But Earl, it doesn't matter. It's being
doesn't
called on
change
you.
the
You
discipline.
know they're calling it. So do something about it.
Hey, look, despite everything else, I'm going to simplify this really all the way down. And I can't believe that we have to get this simple with this team. But for the game this weekend against the Bengals, Jacob, you mentioned what you want to see from the team. What I need to see from the team is as simple as a clean game from Patrick Mahomes. That's all I need to see. I don't care at this point if the team scores 14 points or if they score 17 points or what. Like, they don't need to score a ton. I just need to see a clean game from QB1. I need to see a clean game from number 15 because we haven't seen that lately. And there's a lot of reasons as to why. It's not all his fault. There's a lot that's going on. But simply put, at its very basic level, we have to see Patrick Mahomes play a clean game. If he can do that, it's been a while since he's done that with the defense they have. At that point, I start to feel okay about their chances against the Bengals.
Here's the thing, though. This is where I get back to an offensive coordinator realizes his players' strengths and weaknesses. If those tackles are not holding up under pressure, which against the Raiders, that was the third most pressure he's felt all year, right?
Yeah, it was bad.
It's hard to throw a ball when you're running for your life. Instead of 7-step drops, go to 5-step drops.
But Earl, how many times in the game against the Raiders did we watch Patrick Mahomes running for his life and then trying to force a throw, where in years past we probably would have seen him throw the ball away? He's not doing that like he used to.
That. He would throw the ball with guys he had chemistry with that would come back to him. That he ran around and guys knew where he was going to end up. These receivers aren't doing that. MVS, he played like 80% of the snaps and didn't have a single catch.
Mahomes ain't going to throw him the ball.
Explain that.
Because Mahomes doesn't trust him. And Mahomes is like, that bridge has been burned. Mahomes is not going to throw him the ball.
So why is he still on the field?
Great question.
Because they don't have anybody to replace him. I know. It is a good question.
They have tight ends that can come in there. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Cleveland is winning games down to their a quarterback off the street, third string running back. Their offensive line has been decimated. Their offensive coordinator and head coach comes up with a plan that makes what they have work now. What we're still trying to do, and I saw this against the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, we're still trying to ram that square peg in a round hole. Come up with a different game plan because it's not working, man. That's what you're paid to do. So, okay.
We're saying the same thing. Earl, I appreciate it.
All right.
Merry
Take
Christmas.
Care. Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah. We're all three saying the same thing is what's interesting here. The Chiefs have to change what they do. The Chiefs have to become something they haven't been. The Chiefs have to simplify this thing. Stop trying to make what's not working work and do what is working, which is play great defense, which is trying to run the ball. I agree with the 5 and 7 steps. I want Mahomes under center, and I want him to run I formation and set up play. I said that last week. Set up some play action. Let whichever receiver, not MVS but let whatever receiver it is run so wide open that it's almost impossible to fail. And I know that's asking a lot at times this year. But do those things, even if, and again, Tommy, we're saying the same thing. If you only go out and your goal is to score 14 offensive points, great. Let's see if that works. You have 2 weeks to try it out. They're not going to miss the playoffs. So you've got some time here to try something else.
I'm at the point where if they score 14 points offensively, but they have 0 turnovers, okay. I can live with that.
That's what absolutely, because their defense is good enough. And that's what we're not talking enough about. And this is why I get back into, I still think they have a puncher's chance in the playoffs, because I do think that this defense, when healthy, can be that kind of defense. Maybe is that kind of defense. So let's see it. Let's see if they can be. Go out and just take the air out of the ball to some degree. Run it. Do whatever you've got to do to play mistake-free and lean into your defense. It's so counterintuitive to what we've seen now for 5 years from the Chiefs. So it's not as easy to just do it as it is to say it, but that's on the coaches. And you got to get with Mahomes and say, hey, look, man, like we know that, you're pressing out there. Like we can see it on film. Like, Mahomes typically doesn't take the risks and chances that he feels like I think he's got to take now. We don't need to do that. Let's run the ball and let's let our defense win us this game. Let's see how this goes. They showed last year that they can redefine themselves. They did post Tyreek Hill. They redefined themselves a couple of times now. After the Super Bowl loss to Tampa, when teams were playing them, when Tampa sort of, remember, and I know the offensive line was the thing we all remember about that game, but remember that Tampa is the original team that started playing them defensively different than they had been played. And then the next year, everybody started doing that. And it took a while for the Chiefs to say, we're going to take what the defense gives us. They're taking the top off. Okay, and then they did that. And then Tyreek Hill leaves. And then they redefined themselves last year with a better group of pass catchers holistically. I think the role for McKinnon was bigger. Certainly Juju was more trustworthy. So, it's not totally different, but it was better last year. This year, redefine yourself again. They can do it. It's just, will they do it? And they got 2 weeks to find out. Let's take a quick break. We're past it here. 869-1240 on the IHOP hotline. Appreciate the call, Earl. Let's jump into it. We'll get into a look ahead a little bit to K-State on Thursday. We'll certainly do more of that tomorrow as well as we make our way through this Wednesday edition of Sports Daily.
Your phone call is welcome. 869-1240. Sports Daily on 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Dude, you gotta hear this.
Go ahead. I think I want to hear this.
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This game tomorrow is an unpredictable one. 33 players, Tommy, have entered the transfer portal combined for these two teams. An All-American linebacker apparently is sitting out for NC State. Like I when we talk about unpredictability in a bowl game, like I got nothing here as far as trying to guess at what might happen in this one. You know, for us here, it gets so simple in that we're looking at Avery Johnson, right? And Avery Johnson's ability as a young player and what is he going to do? That part of it makes it must watch for us, you know, and I'm glad we have that, because otherwise I don't know what we would be doing with this game. Like, it's a mess as far as the rosters go. It really is a game to the future. And this is what drives me nuts about bowl season. I love what bowl season is in theory, as long as we just embrace the fact that these are absolutely exhibition games. I do think as the dust settles on college football, portal entry needs to wait until after the first of the year, or after at least, whatever, everything's been played but the college football championship. That would help, I think, to some degree. The draft decisions you would still obviously have now, as guys are, not wanting to play in these games to risk injury. And I know that bothers people, but I think the only way to embrace bowl season properly is to embrace it as an exhibition game. Embrace it as having fun if you're out there and a fan and getting a chance to go to Orlando and hang out for a little bit around the holidays and root on your team. But it's always been hard for me to take these games seriously when there is not an implication on them in the aftermath. And I know these are your teammates and these are your guys, and you want to, for a lot of guys, it's playing one more college football game. And that matters a whole lot more to some players than it does to others, and that's okay. I don't think it's giving up on your team. I don't think it's any of those things if it's a situation where you're trying to go be the best that you can be in a sport where, it can all end at any point on any given Saturday, I guess, or Thursday in this case. Like, sometimes I think players take too much criticism. The rules allow transfers, but if a player like Will Howard, for instance, is trying to find his spot and find where he's going to have the best chance to be successful, maybe it's an NIL opportunity, or maybe it's to get to the NFL. That's okay. Like, I don't have ill will to that. You get such a small window and small opportunity to play professionally. And for so many of these players, that is their goal in life. And so to overreact to these games that, again, the Pop-Tarts Bowl in Orlando, I am jacked up for this game because I love that K-State gets to play another football game, but it doesn't bother me that much that guys aren't playing in it. I do think, though, on the flip side of that, we do need to get control of the timing of the transfer portal. You don't need transfer portal things happening before these games are played, but I get it. I get why it's happening. What are guys going to do? Let's say Will Howard doesn't enter the transfer portal, and he's still on the roster. He knows he's going to enter the transfer portal, but he doesn't enter the transfer portal. Okay. So now what do you do in this bowl game? Do you sit Will Howard? Do you not, take a look at Avery Johnson? I know fans are frustrated that players are leaving and they think that guys are giving up. But the reality is, this is the best thing that could happen for K-State next year, is that all these young players play in this game. And it might mean you lose the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Might. But who cares? Because now what you'll have is a situation where there's a head start. You have something to go back to next year and all off season with these young players. It's here's what you did well, but here's where you have to get better. There's a taste of it. X player, Y player, you got your butt kicked here, or you did this really well. Let's focus on that now this offseason. Nothing can replace real game action. And I think what the reality is of these bowl games is, yes, not everybody takes them as seriously, but the players that are out there playing are going to play, right? They're not going to just get out there and loaf around. No, they're going to play. And I think what you see, and it's not like that's never happened. I think it has, where guys have loafed it a little bit in bowl games and maybe not tried as hard, like a Pro Bowl situation, maybe in the NFL, where you've got players out there, but it's like, I don't really want to get hurt. Now that guys don't have to play it and it's far more accepted, and maybe they're transferring out or they're sitting out and they're getting ready for the draft, all that, the guys that are out there are far more likely to play hard. So for K-State, yeah, it's tough to see so many names that you saw all year not there on Thursday, but that fact will help them next year. The fact that Colin Klein is gone now versus 2 weeks from now stinks in the short term, probably hurts them in the short term of trying to win this football game, but in reality gives you a chance to look at what life without him might be. I think if we think of tomorrow as an opportunity for K-State with the coaches and players that they'll be missing, it's far more reasonable than getting upset that so many of the guys won't be there and upset and scream at the clouds of, I can't believe, these guys aren't there in this game, because this game just isn't very important as far as winning it. You always want to win a football game. Don't get me wrong. But if we're looking to the future, it's almost better for this program next year that everybody's already gone, because the young players will get an opportunity to play. New coaches will get an opportunity to coach them. You cannot replace an actual game and the value that it could bring. So embrace it. You may lose it now because you don't have your full cast of characters, but next year's team will be better because these guys all got a game of experience.
Don't you think, though, that a victory for Kansas State tomorrow night, or even a good showing tomorrow night, validates the future direction of this program? I mean, I know that you say that it doesn't really matter if you win it or whatever. I think that if they're able to put together even just a good showing, it's not even necessarily a victory against NC State, but it's a good showing with Avery Johnson, with some of these pieces that are going to, I think, play pretty solid roles, pretty large roles within this team next season, that it's a validation of the direction they're going. I really do think that that can be the case. I don't think you can look at it from only a final score perspective. I think you have to look at it big picture in the future, but I do think that there's some validation that can be there.
Yeah, look, I think winning is always important. So don't misunderstand how winning is always better. Winning is always important. You should try to win every game you play. It's not what I'm saying. But I don't think it's as important to the future as getting these guys the experience, in the sense that if all the K-State players were there and playing in this game, yeah, they'd have a better chance to win the game, which is important. But for the future of this program, is that as important in this moment than all of these young players getting an opportunity now to go and have some real game experience?
I think it gives you a glimpse into what this program can be next season. And I think that,
sure it does.
And again, it's kind of a little bit of an appetizer, right? A little bit of a teaser into next season. You can kind of watch this. And if there, again, is a good showing, regardless of the final score, if there are some flashes from Avery Johnson, if there are some things that they do that you can get excited about for next year, then that's going to make the next 9 months feel a lot better for Kansas State fans and, the entire fan base, because they know the foundation is there for success next season. Yeah, there are a lot of holes to fill. There are a lot of players that, don't have a ton of experience and are going to be playing tomorrow night in Orlando. But I do think that because they're able to get a glimpse of that, then yeah, it'll get the coaching staff excited. It'll get those players excited and get them ready to build on that foundation this offseason and get ready for next year.
Yes. This will be better for the future of this program, but it may come at the cost of a victory. I mean, that's
might.
the reality.
Yeah,
now,
it might.
It may not. It may not. I mean, I don't know. Like, right. Again, like there's 33 players that normally would play in this game that aren't playing in this game.
Right.
So I don't know what to. I'm gonna have fun with it. I'm gonna root for them to win, just like with KU last night. But I do think you can embrace and look at the glass half full, and no matter what happens tomorrow, know that it will benefit them in some way next year. If they come in and get their tails kicked, it's going to benefit them this offseason because now you've got something as a reference point if you're the coaches. Remember, was it 2 years ago when Colin Klein made his, play calling debut in a bowl game? That make you feel better about the future?
Oh, yeah.
It did.
For sure it did.
So that opportunity is also there.
And now you've had almost a month to get ready without Colin Klein for this bowl game. So you can maybe start to see the direction that they might go from an offensive play calling point of view, a scheme point of view, all of that. And now knowing that you're going to have Avery Johnson as your starter, you can kind of combine his talent with the way that they want to, design the plays and the entire offensive scheme. Those are all things that I think that we'll get a little bit of an appetizer on tomorrow night that we'll be able to build for the future.
And that's my point. You may have less of a chance to win this game. In fact, you certainly will have less of a chance to win this game. But it may be the better thing for the program that it's happening. And that's a hard thing to get a grasp of, but it's not as hard for me when I remember that these are exhibition games. And we're just not going to remember 4 or 5 years from now. It's not going to be top of the mind. Did K-State win that Pop-Tarts Bowl back in 2023? No. You'll be thinking about, the development of some of these young players into their senior years and what it's meant. That's far more important. And that it's a weird thing to say. It's always been my issue with bowl season is these are exhibition games. They're exhibition games, except for 2 of them that will be played. And that's the CFP. That's all changing for the better. But for everybody else, these are fun. They're fun for the fans. It's fun for the players to go spend a week in sunny Florida. This is an exhibition game. So I'm glad K-State gets the most benefit they can. I'm glad they know who's out now and who's coming back and that guys have entered the portal early and all of those things because it will help determine what they do this offseason to be the best version of themselves in the games that do matter again next year. Let's take a quick break. 869-1240 on Sports Daily. We'll come back with more as we wrap up a Wednesday.
.97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. A bit of a bombshell here in the NFL world as Ian Rappaport is reporting that the Broncos are strongly considering having Russell Wilson sit out the final 2 games, preserving financial flexibility. He's got a salary that vests in March of 24. I think the point of this is if he suffered a serious injury late this season, it would sort of guarantee his contract for next season is what I gather. And they're leaving their options open maybe to move on from Russell Wilson in this offseason if that's the way they choose to go. That's an interesting concept. Russell Wilson has not been he has not been the worst quarterback in football by any means this year. He's got, I think, like the 7th highest quarterback rating in football, 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions. Patrick Mahomes, as an example, has 26 touchdowns to 14 interceptions, and they have nearly identical completion percentages. Russell Wilson has a higher passer rating this year than Justin Herbert, than Patrick Mahomes. Then he's right there with Brock Purdy. He's higher than Trevor Lawrence. He's right there with Jalen Hurts. So as we look at this, it's really interesting because he's got a higher passer rating than Lamar Jackson. He has not been bad this year. He's been fine, decent, maybe even above average, pretty good, however you want to define it. Yet the Broncos, because of this contract situation, have this decision to make on what to do with him. And now they're, according to Ian Rappaport, thinking about sitting him down to finish the year to make sure that he doesn't get hurt and keep their options of flexibility. This is fascinating. We're going to get into this tomorrow, certainly, because I haven't looked at the Broncos and thought, man, Russell Wilson, like it's almost like a redemption story for him this year and how much better he's been and they've been than they were a year ago. And if the Broncos move on from him, I got to think after what we're seeing this year, he's still an option for somebody out there. He could make somebody better. Again, the numbers don't lie for him this year. He's been objectively better than a lot of the best. Now he's under different circumstances, of course, and the expectations aren't quite as high and all those things. But wow, what a fascinating story. All right, we'll take our final break. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on the network today and get things tidied up here on a Wednesday on Sports Daily.
This holiday.
Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, everybody. We appreciate it today. It's going to be fun tomorrow getting ready for that next bowl game. See if K-State can match the excitement KU fans are feeling right now. Jim Rome, 11-2. Bob and Jeff locally here 2-4. Zach Gelb then at 4. That's it. No special programming tonight. So CBS Sports Radio after Bob and Jeff will take you home throughout the evening. We appreciate Max filling in for Jad for the next few days. Tommy, enjoy your Wednesday.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Big bowl games today. We've got like a full slate of bowl games again as the afternoon goes on. So looking forward to watching that.
Say big bowl games.
Well,
I do want to see if I want to see if Oklahoma State can take down A&M. I do want to see that. All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll talk about it all later.